For decades, the immigration court system was seen as slow, dysfunctional, maybe even a failing bureaucracy, but one we all sort of assumed was protected by institutional independence. That assumption just shattered. An executive order has just fundamentally reshaped the judiciary and some of the busiest immigration courts in the nation, eliminating fully 20% of the entire system's judges in less than a year. This unprecedented purge saw the swift removal of over 100 judges across cities like New York and San Francisco, targeting judges the administration openly views as ideologically motivated. This is a constitutional clash. Is this action a necessary, long overdue correction to enforce the law? Or is it a calculated abuse of presidential power designed to achieve political ends? We uncover the full story of who was fired, why they could be fired, and what the administration's true goal is. Stay with us as we break this down in our in-depth discussion right here on News Focus Podcast. If you find our reporting valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe to support our channel. We truly appreciate it. Welcome back. Let's unpack this immediately because the numbers are just staggering. And the language being used, I mean, you hear words like massacre, purge. It's incredibly confrontational.
It is. This isn't just a simple staff change.
No, this is a systemic strategic change. And it was implemented with just breathtaking speed. So when we look at the raw data, what's the overall scale here? How do we know this was a strategic move and not just a few isolated firings?
Well, the sheer breadth of the action is what defines it. Since the beginning of the year, the administration has moved so decisively, firing over 100 immigration judges across the country.
100 plus judges.
Right, and that figure might not sound enormous until you put it in context. It represents fully 20% of the nation's entire immigration judge corps.
20%. 1/5 of the entire body.
Exactly. I mean, just imagine any federal agency, any judicial body losing 1/5 of its entire professional staff in, less than a year.
It's unheard of.
It is. So this isn't just a restructuring, it's a fundamental decapitation of a huge portion of the judiciary responsible for this. The intent here is clearly systemic turnover.
And that 20% figure, I mean, that's a gut punch to the system's ability to even function. But as you look closer, the locations they targeted tell an even more specific story, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't spread evenly across the country.
No.
The most intense activity was really concentrated in these high-volume, politically significant cities. It's almost as if they were targeting ideological strongholds.
That geographic analysis feels crucial.
It is. I mean, if you want to change the culture of an institution, you start by targeting the centers of gravity where the old culture is most entrenched, right?
Right.
So look at the details. Let's start on the East Coast. In New York City, 8 judges were fired in a single day.
In one day.
In one day. And that was on top of 6 previous removals that had already happened in Manhattan.
So when you add those up,
When you total them, the administration eliminated 25% of New York's entire immigration judiciary. Almost overnight.
a quarter of them.
A quarter? I mean, that kind of removal rate doesn't just clear the deck. It paralyzes the existing structure. It clears the way for a completely new operational philosophy.
So they didn't just trim the edges, they cut right into the muscle in a major city. And New York is a huge port of entry, a massive processing hub. What of the other side of the country? Did we see a similar intensity in, say, San Francisco?
San Francisco saw something just as dramatic, maybe even more severe. 15 judges were recently sacked there.
15.
This action was so decisive that it left the city with less than 50% of the immigration judges it had only a year ago.
So these specific jurisdictions, New York, San Francisco, they're obviously important for their case volume.
Immensely. But it's also about their historical outcomes. These are courts known for high caseloads and, crucially, courts that historically have shown substantially higher asylum grant rates compared to the national average.
And this is where it gets really interesting, isn't it? When you target these specific places, you're making a political and ideological statement, not just solving an administrative problem.
That's the deep analytical insight here. The strategic importance is twofold, just like you said. First, these are bottleneck courts. They manage such a huge volume of cases that any change in their personnel has these massive, cascading national effects on the numbers.
But the second part is maybe even more important.
I think so. The administration views these areas, and the judges within them, as the epicenter of the ideological opposition to its enforcement mandate.
So the argument is, if you change the people in the courts that grant the most asylum and cause the biggest delays, You immediately signal a nationwide shift in policy.
You send a system-wide signal, yes, even before the new replacement judges are fully in place. It's a clear statement of intent. It prioritizes swift enforcement over prolonged deliberation.
It's addressing what they see as a deliberate ideological imbalance in the system.
Exactly. So the firings serve two purposes. They create the physical vacancies you need to fill, and they send an unmistakable institutional message to the remaining 80% of judges nationwide that the mandate has changed.
And that the cost of, let's say, ideological non-compliance is immediate removal.
It is. The sheer scale of this, 20% nationwide, 25% in New York, it really forces us to move beyond just counting the numbers and start analyzing the core controversy, which is the legal ground this all stands on.
Okay, let's get into that, because this is where the legal and political narratives just completely diverge. The media is framing this as an unprecedented power grab.
Right.
Suggesting the executive branch is violating the independence of the judiciary.
Right.
This brings us to the fundamental question. Why can't a president fire judges? I mean, the assumption for most of us is that once a judge is seated, they're untouchable, independent for life. We have to challenge that narrative.
And this is the essential distinction that the public often misses, and it goes right to the heart of our constitutional design. The outrage you're hearing relies on conflating two very different types of officials.
Okay.
Immigration judges are not Article III federal judges.
So not Supreme Court, not district courts.
Exactly. Those Article III judges are the constitutionally protected judiciary. They serve during good behavior, and they're extremely difficult to remove. You need impeachment. That status is what guarantees their independence from political pressure.
So the judges we typically think of, the ones deciding major cases, those are the ones who are untouchable. But the judges who decide whether someone stays or goes in an immigration proceeding are a different legal animal entirely.
A completely different legal animal, yes. Immigration judges are defined as Article II administrative officials.
Article 2, the executive branch.
The executive branch. They are, in essence, employees of the executive tasked with implementing and enforcing executive policy. They don't report to the Supreme Court. They work for the Executive Office for Immigration Review, or EOIR.
Which is part of the Department of Justice.
Which is part of the DOJ,
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's just pause there for a second to make sure everyone understands the practical difference. So if an Article 3 judge is like a tenured professor with a lifetime job guarantee, what's an Article 2 administrative official like an immigration judge comparable to?
That's a great analogy. A good comparison would be a high-level administrative staff member, maybe an IRS auditor, or even a judge in a military court-martial.
Okay.
While they perform judicial-like functions, they weigh evidence, they make legal decisions, they are fundamentally accountable to the executive branch that employs them. Their job exists to carry out the policy objectives of the president and the attorney general.
So they're not wearing the robes of constitutional independence. They're wearing the uniform of a federal employee who just happens to have a very specific role.
That's a perfect way to put it, and that distinction is vital. It means the attorney general, in this case Pam Bondi as mentioned, is their direct boss, and the president is the attorney general's boss.
So there's a clear legal chain of command.
It's an unambiguous chain of command, and it's that legal status that provides the clear constitutional basis for the president's action. It makes that power grab framing constitutionally misleading.
Because the president has the authority to remove inferior officers.
The constitutional authority, yes. And immigration judges fit exactly into that category. They're appointed by the attorney general, who is a political appointee of the president, and they are not confirmed by the Senate to those lifetime Article III positions.
So their removal doesn't require that high bar of impeachment. It falls squarely under the executive's authority to manage its own house, basically.
To manage its own administrative function and ensure its subordinates are implementing the law as the executive branch dictates. Yes.
And that's really the heart of the matter.
It is. When critics frame this as an attack on judicial independence, they are ignoring the foundational legal status of this court system. These courts were established under the DOJ, an enforcement agency, to serve an enforcement purpose.
So if the executive branch decides that its own employees are undermining that mission,
the law regarding Article II officers grants the president the explicit power to remove them.
What's so fascinating is how the media framing creates this narrative, the constitutional crisis, but the action itself is operating entirely within the established, if maybe overlooked, bounds of administrative law.
And it raises an important question, right? If these judges were intended to be wholly independent, why were they put under the Department of Justice in the first place and not established as standalone Article III courts?
And the answer is inherent in their purpose.
Exactly. They are there to administer the immigration laws passed by Congress and enforced by the executive. So when that administration, in the view of the executive, fails catastrophically, the executive branch claims the right and the duty to correct it.
This legal context is so important because it shifts the entire debate. It's not about constitutional integrity anymore. It's about administrative efficiency and political will. So if the president has a legal authority, the real question becomes, what was the justification for the purge?
Right. And the justification the administration gives is rooted in a crisis so overwhelming that they argue any action is necessary. They point to systemic failure, the court system's collapse due to the backlog, and what they allege is ideological negligence.
That collapse is the root cause they point to.
It is, and we need to look at the data because it is, well, it's truly devastating.
Let's talk about that data. Give us the numbers that define this backlog crisis. Paint a picture of a system that had basically ceased to function.
The immigration court backlog has nearly tripled in just 4 years. Tripled. To be specific, back in 2020, we were already dealing with about 1.3 million pending cases. By the end of this year, 2024, that number is expected to balloon to an astonishing 3.7 million pending cases.
3.7 million.
That kind of exponential growth shows a system that isn't just struggling, it's completely seized up. It's an administrative disaster, no matter how you look at it.
And tripling the caseload in 4 years translates directly into wait times that just deny timely justice to everyone involved, right?
Yeah. To everyone. The operational outcome is just chaos. The average wait time for a migrant court hearing now stands at nearly 4 years.
4 years.
Think about what that means. 4 years of administrative cost, 4 years of legal limbo for the person involved, and 4 years where the government can't execute a final deportation order.
Yeah.
It basically allows people to stay in the country indefinitely.
Which acts as a massive magnet for more illegal entry because the consequences are never immediate.
Of course. And the most extreme examples. They almost defy belief. They make it clear why the administration labeled the situation criminal negligence.
What are we talking about?
Well, while 4 years is the average, the real collapse is in the outliers. We have documented cases, specific examples, of New York cases that are not slated to be heard until the 2030s.
Wait, the 2030s?
The 2030s, yes.
What?
When you're scheduling cases a decade out, the system has effectively become a de facto amnesty program. The administration's view is that this isn't just inefficiency, it's a deliberate criminal negligence caused by judges who, they allege, prioritized ideology over enforcement.
That phrase, criminal negligence, is obviously very charged. So what evidence does the administration point to support that claim? That the delay is ideological and not just, say, a result of underfunding?
They point directly to the judges' professional backgrounds and, maybe more importantly, their case outcomes.
Yep.
The core claim is that these courts were being intentionally used as stalling tactics.
Stalling tactics.
The theory goes that by pushing cases further and further into the future, into the 2030s, the judges were effectively waiting out political cycles.
Waiting for a future administration that might declare a mass amnesty.
And thereby circumventing the enforcement mechanism entirely. That's the core argument. And to support that claim of ideological bias, they often cite external investigations into the backgrounds of these judges.
Right, like that NPR investigation.
Exactly. An NPR investigation, which, can't be easily dismissed as right-wing propaganda, found that a substantial number, in fact, most of the fired judges, had prior professional backgrounds defending illegal migrants before they ever became judges.
That's a powerful data point. It gets right to the heart of the institutional culture. If most of your personnel are coming from the defense side of the bar, it suggests a certain perspective might dominate the courtroom.
It could potentially skew decisions toward leniency or procedural complexity, or at the very least, extensive deliberation that just makes the backlog worse.
And there were specific examples, right, of judges they singled out.
Yes. Take the case of Judge David Kim in Manhattan. He was one of the judges fired, and the administration's reason for his removal. He reportedly had the highest asylum grant rate of any judge at that courthouse.
So for the administration, that pattern isn't a sign of balanced justice.
To them, it's proof that these judges are far too lenient, that they're allowing people to stay who should have been sent home, and thus encouraging more illegal migration.
So the administration's narrative is clear. These judges weren't just incompetent, they were an active, deliberate bottleneck.
That is precisely their stated position. They frame the firings not as a breakdown of law, but as a necessary correction to address a court system they believe was weaponized for political outcomes delay and de facto amnesty, rather than neutral, efficient enforcement.
So if the first phase was the purge, the Monday massacre, as some are calling it, the second phase is the replacement strategy. And this is what's causing absolute panic among opposing groups.
Because the administration isn't just creating vacancies, they are actively and very quickly rebuilding the bench with a fundamentally different kind of person.
So what's the strategy for this overhaul?
The overhaul is a masterclass in calculated intent. It's characterized by a deliberate shift in personnel background and even in how the job itself is conceived. This is where their intent becomes crystal clear.
Let's start with the symbolism, because the language here matters a lot. They're proposing a name change for these roles.
That's right. The administration is actively moving from the historical term immigration judges to what they are now labeling deportation judges.
Deportation judges.
It's more than just semantics. It is an institutional mission statement. It explicitly signals that the primary function of the role is removal and enforcement. It shifts the entire philosophy from just processing to decisive action.
And that's a powerful psychological signal to anyone applying for the job. It tells you exactly what the expected outcome is.
It does. And to attract this new kind of person quickly, they've made the positions very appealing.
High salary, Rob.
High compensation, up to $200,000 a year, and significantly the potential for remote work. This is all designed to draw talent quickly and efficiently from the professional pool they want.
But the real strategic shift, the linchpin of this whole thing, is in the required professional background of the new hires. They are explicitly excluding the profile that defined the old guard.
Oh, absolutely. The new judge profile is calculated to produce specific outcomes. They are explicitly recruiting candidates from backgrounds in immigration enforcement, military service, and federal service.
We're talking about people who may have worked for ICE.
People who work directly for ICE, maybe even for teams led by Tom Holman, who was known for very aggressive enforcement. They are deliberately avoiding the previous recruitment pool, which was the defense bar.
And we have hard data on this. That New York Times review of the new hires was pretty revealing.
It was. The data point is critical to understanding their method. A New York Times review of 11 of the new judges hired found a startling fact. Not a single 10% had prior immigration defense experience.
Not one.
Not one. Every single one of them came from law enforcement or prosecution backgrounds. This is not an attempt to balance the judiciary. This is a calculated attempt to create an enforcement-first court system.
That 0% figure is.
Yeah.
It's the whole strategy in a nutshell. They are systematically excluding the very ideological background they claimed created the backlog in the first place.
That is the Trumpian strategy right there. The goal is simple. Create a court system that prioritizes deportation over delay and enforcement over ideology. They are executing a fundamental overhaul of the personnel that they argue deliberately clogged up the system.
So the argument is, if the old courts functioned as a de facto amnesty program by slowing everything down, the new courts will function as an efficient, streamlined removal mechanism.
It's an aggressive administrative solution to a profound political problem. By ensuring the new judges have backgrounds in federal enforcement, the administration expects unwavering adherence to the rule of law as they define it.
Which means timely application of removal orders.
Exactly. They see this as restoring the operational integrity of a system they believe was corrupted by ideological opposition.
And the systematic overhaul has, not surprisingly, led to a major political backlash. Let's shift to the reaction. What are we seeing from groups who oppose this?
The reaction has been one of deep concern, escalating very quickly into panic, because the activists see clearly that the administration is succeeding.
This isn't just a political skirmish for them.
No, it's a structural transformation. Left-wing activists are openly admitting this action is fundamentally reshaping the entire deportation process. They recognize this shift isn't temporary. It's an institutional culture change that will have lasting effects on millions of cases.
It's interesting, when activists admit the entire process is being reshaped, it sort of confirms the administration's claim that the old system was, in fact, politically engineered.
It's the crux of the conflict, isn't it? The opposition immediately recognized the severity of this shift, and this panic translated almost instantly into specific legislative responses, even though they were largely symbolic.
What specific actions did they try to take in Congress?
Well, Democrats introduced legislation trying to limit who could serve as a temporary immigration judge. And notably, the legislation aims specifically to prevent military lawyers from taking these positions.
That's very telling, the focus on military lawyers.
It's laser-focused. It confirms the opposition sees the rapid hiring of disciplined, enforcement-minded personnel as the single greatest threat to their goal of slowing deportations. They're afraid of people who are fundamentally goal-oriented toward enforcement.
Which confirms the administration's strategic intent.
Absolutely. But to really understand why the administration views this as fulfilling a political mandate, we need to broaden the context a bit.
Right, take that analytical jump. Connect this specific domestic policy to the wider concept of national security. We've heard this term post-security politics used as a framework here. What exactly does that mean?
Post-security politics is a concept that's gained a lot of traction globally. It's used to explain the worldwide political backlash against what is perceived as a decades-long, deliberate effort by liberal globalists to erode the basic securities that the nation-state has historically provided.
So the idea is that elites have systematically dismantled the core protections citizens rely on, which leads to this mass public frustration and a mandate for drastic correction. What are those core securities?
They're defined as three interwoven pillars of national stability. First, you have border security, mass immigration, unchecked entry. Second is economic security protecting native labor markets, not shipping jobs overseas. And third is cultural security, shared customs, language, and the perception that migratory cultures aren't assimilating.
And the argument is that globalist policies eroded all three of those pillars. So how does that high-level political theory translate directly back to firing immigration judges?
The firings are seen as the ultimate manifestation of restoring border security. The central argument is that the previous court system was actively complicit in eroding that security by acting as a mechanism for intentional delay.
The 3.7 million case backlog, stretching into the 2030s, acted as a powerful incentive for more illegal entry.
Because the consequences were non-existent, the judges in this view were facilitating the erosion of the nation-state's primary function controlling its borders. The court system is seen as the administrative cog that enabled this triple erosion of security.
So the purge isn't just about administrative efficiency.
No, it's framed as an act of long overdue accountability for citizens who have watched the system fail for decades. They see it not as creating chaos, but as a systemic correction of a court system they believe was deliberately clogged to serve political goals, rather than to enforce sovereign law.
When you frame it through that lens, the actions start to look less like chaos and more like the fulfillment of a core political mandate.
And we have hard evidence that this policy aligns directly with current voter sentiment. The administration is operating with a clear mandate here.
Let's look at that polling data. What does it tell us about public support for such an aggressive policy?
The recent polling is remarkable. A combined Rasmussen and New York Times poll cited 66% support among likely voters for the administration's aggressive deportation policies.
Two-thirds of likely voters.
And even more strikingly, another New York Times poll found almost the exact same figure, 63% support for deporting all illegal migrants who entered the U.S. in the past 4 years.
With that level of public support, the administration views these firings not just as a necessary move, but as a direct promise kept to the electorate.
This is exactly why they dismissed the media's focus on chaos and massacre. To them, the chaos was the 3.7 million case backlog and the decade-long wait times. The firings are the correction. They are installing judges who will prioritize moving cases through the system quickly, fulfilling that public mandate for order.
So to summarize our deep dive, we started with the stunning fact of 20% of immigration judges being fired. We established that this was constitutionally permissible because they are Article II administrative officers. We then analyzed the overwhelming backlog crisis as the central justification and concluded that the strategic replacement with enforcement-focused personnel is a calculated move to restore what the administration and a majority of the electorate view as essential national security, all framed within this concept of post-security politics.
That is the essential summation. The legal authority from Article 2 allowed for this swift change. The severity of the backlog provided the political rationale. And the calculated selection of new judges with zero defense experience ensures the philosophical shift from delay to rapid deportation is immediate and institutional. The entire action is a powerful demonstration of executive authority asserting its enforcement mandate. Thank you, and thank you to our listeners.
That's all for this deep dive. But it leaves us with one haunting question. If the guardians of the rules are the first to break them, who is left to protect the game?